I've been wanting to build a clamp to hold the rings of a segmented bowl together as they're being glued together. In the past, I've always tried to do it with a 2x4 and some regular clamps, and the rings sort of slide around, and it's difficult to keep everything held stable while the glue is still wet. What I've been thinking about for the last few months or even a year is to build something that pushes down onto the set of rings to hold the bowl together. And this would mean building a frame and then a threaded rod that would screw down onto a plate that would push on the rings of the bowl. And this would work, but I got a comment a few months back, and I don't remember who it was from or even which video it went to. And it wasn't even really a complete idea, but it got me thinking about a completely different way to do the clamp, and that would be to have the threaded rod be attached to the base and pull the pressure plates down onto the bowl so that the rings of the bowl would go around the threaded rod and the threaded rod would pull the rings together. And this seemed much simpler because I wouldn't need the rails and the structure and all the stuff above that I was going to need with the other method. So my first thought was to weld the threaded rod to a metal plate and then attach the metal plate to the base. But I realized it would be easier just to bolt the threaded rod to the plate. So I drilled a larger hole in the plate. And I went to bolt this onto the rod, and I was going to need 4 holes in the metal plate to hold the metal plate to the wood base. And I realized I didn't really even need the metal plate. I could just run the rod through the wooden base and bolt the rod to the wooden base directly. And this seemed much simpler. What I needed was a hole through the center of the wooden base. The drill press that I usually use didn't have enough depth to get all the way to the center of my wood base. So I used my old Canedy-Otto drill press, which I really haven't used much. It's just barely working as it is. In fact, it has 4 speeds and really only the slowest speed works because the belt slips on the faster speeds. It was slow going, but it worked. And I got my hole drilled for the threaded rod. Because there's going to be a bolt sticking out of the bottom of the wood base, I put the wood base up on feet, which would basically give some space for that bolt that would stick out of the bottom. And I doubled up the thickness of the wood base to get the distance between the top and bottom bolt a little further apart, which would give the rod a little more strength as it's sticking straight up from the base. And this distance would help hold the rod square to the base. Now for the pressure plates, I couldn't slide those over the bolt that's going to hold the pressure plates down. So what I needed to do was cut a slot into those plates so that they could be threaded onto the rod from the side instead of having to be brought down from the top. So I cut out 3 different size circles on the CNC, each with a slot that was slightly bigger than the threaded rod. And this could be done on a bandsaw, but it was nice to get perfectly round circles and a slot that was perfectly straight and easy to slide onto the threaded rod. Now I cut these out with little tabs on the CNC machine so that the center circle piece wouldn't come out when it was finished. So I cut those tabs free on the bandsaw. And then we can see how it works. I can put a ring down on the base, and you can see how the pressure plate slides onto the rod, and that seems to work. So I got out the glue and I started to glue. Now this is a bowl I'm working on, which should be the next video. I was doing 3 rings at a time. I could probably do more than that. I figured I would see how this works first before I start testing it. So you can see how the pressure plates can slide in from the side and they don't have to come down from the top where they wouldn't fit over the bolt that then pushes down on the pressure plates. Now it needs some clamping force, but it doesn't need like 50 tons of clamping force. You don't want to squeeze the glue out. So it just needs to be enough to get rid of the gaps in the seams between the rings. And if they're flat, that really shouldn't be an issue. The different sizes of pressure plates work with the different sizes of rings on the bowl. So if I glued the entire bowl up at once, I would really only need the little pressure plate. So you can see how the system works with a slice through a bowl, making a section of the clamp. Now once I had done a bowl with the clamp, I thought it would be nice to have circles either drawn or cut into the base to help line up the center of the rings, and mostly the first ring, just so I can get the bowl started in the center. So what I thought I'd do is cut some circles on the CNC machine. My first go at it, I was using a little tiny engraving bit that I had, and it kept pushing up into the router. My collet just wasn't able to hold it tight enough. So that really wasn't working. So I had a bigger engraving bit, and I forgot to change the Z height when I started it. I was kind of working quick, and it just jammed into the wood. That's one of the things that can happen if you don't reset your Z. Once that was fixed, it was working just fine. It was a little deeper than I wanted, but I figured I would just let it run. And it ran around and made all the circles just fine. But I didn't notice until the end that I didn't quite have room for the biggest circle. And the router bit hit one of the hold downs. And then the whole piece started to move, and the line got all out of alignment. So that was kind of a big mess, but I learned a few things. So I took the base apart and I flipped the top piece of plywood over and redid the circles on the underside of the top piece of plywood. I put just a single piece of plywood down on the CNC bed so that the hold downs would work a lot better. And I did the hold downs from the corners, which made a lot more sense. So it worked a lot better the second time. And I put the base back together again. And I put the feet back on. I numbered which feet went where so that the holes for the screws would line up again, which made it much easier to put it back together again. And I threaded the rod back in again. And it should be ready to go for the next bowl. Thanks for watching.